Just city manager review.
Yeah, I don't think.
I want to
we
rule,
really
you
know
want to
that.
rule.
Yes, sir, thank you.
How are you feeling?
Feeling good.
Better?
Green shirt the next year. Freezing with the next year.
All right,
I won't get a Christmas card.
I call this, we okay, Wayne? Okay. I call this, meeting, workshop to order for March 17, 2026. Purpose of the city council workshop meetings are for information gathering and discussion purposes only. The city council will not vote on any issues at the workshop meetings. The council reserves the right to discuss additional items or delete items from the tentative agenda. Right now, we only have one item on the agenda, that's the city manager review criteria. But before we go any further, if you don't mind, Mr. Van Wagner, I'm asking you to say a prayer.
Sure, okay. Father, thank you for this opportunity to be together today. We ask for the wisdom of God in this meeting, and we ask for your continued blessing in our city. Thank you for all those that serve and all that they do for this community to make it better. We ask your blessing on them. We ask you to be with us now in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. With said, I'm gonna go ahead and, well, I guess I'll turn it over to Dan.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm doing this since you're assistant manager, city manager, and we're gonna be talking about his criteria here, so if you don't mind, please, sir.
So absolutely. So, I guess about a couple weeks ago, there was an email sent out to all the council members with some sample review criteria for some city managers from around the area, around the state. Some examples of what other communities and other jurisdictions are doing with their city manager evaluations. So with that being said, I know this is important that council wants to set criteria so the manager knows what's being expected of him and vice versa. So just leave it up to council's discussion to see how you want to proceed with this.
Okay, I can say this, far as I know, in the many years I've been around this council, I don't think I've ever had a review of the city, seen a review of the city manager. I know when I came in with the last city manager, one of the goals, our goals, prior administration, was to try to set some standards for evaluation. However, we could never come up with the agreement on some of the criterias and everything. And every time we went out and did research, we came up with so many things, okay, in there. And so it was kind of difficult for us to get that done. And so it's been one of my things anyway to get done, is go ahead and set up some criteria for our city manager. And come to find out, we're not the only city that doesn't really do reviews on city managers. A lot of other cities out there that just never do them, okay? I'll say this out front, one of my really tough sticking points for the criteria is that everybody keeps saying it need to be in public. I don't like doing reviews or performance reviews in public, okay? So that's been one of my main sticking points and everything. Some kind of way we can do this on a private level. I mean, we can still set it up in a way that if the public want to give some feedback, they can and everything. But for us goals, since you work directly for me, I believe in doing them things in private. We used to say in the Air Force, we praise in public. We chastise in private and praise in public. Okay, and when you start talking about evaluation, there's always some opportunity for chastising there, so they don't do that in public. And of course, when I went into the post office, I saw just the opposite. You know, when we was always being chastised in the public and everything that you did good was done in private. I always felt like that was one of the reasons we ended up with that thing called postal crazy, you know, going postal and everything, because guys, what I saw in the post office, looking at us, talk one thing, here come here and see a different thing like that. Well, I can understand why people go off, because they work very hard, and you can never praise them in public, but then as soon as they do something wrong, you jump all over them, and it causes people to go crazy. So that's why I have the sticking point of not wanting to do things in private, but I'm willing to sit here and I hope we can work through something and come up with some kind of criteria and everything, the way we can do this, okay? With that, I open the floor for discussion.
You know, I think that the way that sunshine and meetings laws in Florida are, I think we do, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. City Attorney, we do have to have this as a public meeting and not a behind closed doors meeting with the council reviewing the city manager. Is that correct?
That's true when you're together.
When we're together,
Yes.
yes.
You could do it one-on-one.
Individually, I could make an appointment with the city manager and provide any feedback at any time, and we've had conversations. But in terms of a formal city council review process, that would need to be done at a city council meeting or workshop setting, correct?
The only reason I hesitate in
Yeah,
answering
sure.
is, you know, different cities have mechanisms where sometimes, you know, you could fill out a form and then someone gathers the forms, or someone hires a consultant and then briefs you all on what the results are based on your criteria. So I'm not trying to dodge it. It's just there's many different ways. It's essentially an unlimited spectrum of what you can do. But yes,
Okay.
certainly, you could get together and discuss communally as well.
I just think, I was surprised as a citizen when I first started attending meetings that there was, it just seemed that there was never a formal even goal setting for a city manager. And I don't know how city managers outside of reading tea leaves at council meetings and reading social media posts knows exactly what they should be doing or how they should be doing it, and what outside of the day-to-day they should be focusing on that the council has set some sort of strategic priority or direction for them. And I think we're getting to a point of the size of our community and the scope of our community and what we have going on and what we have planned for the future, that I think it would be beneficial for us to not just talk about the day-to-day functions of what we want to see a city manager do, but to set some strategic priorities or initiatives for them on a yearly basis. And maybe that's the evaluation, that if we agree upon 4 goals or 5 goals and annually we do that, and then we do a review of that, ask the city manager, give us some feedback on how you felt you met these strategic goals or priorities this past year. Each of us could provide that feedback, and one of us could coordinate that. I think that, I know other communities do that. In my previous experience, in elected office, the deputy mayor, or here, the mayor pro tem, was responsible for coordinating that effort on a yearly basis for the council. So I'm not saying it has to be that person, but we could designate somebody to do that, and just provide that feedback, gather it all, put it together, and provide it, and give that feedback so that not only the city manager knows, but also the residents and the general public know, what did we kind of accomplish this past year? What outside of the day-to-day functions of the city did this council come together and say we want to see our city focus on for this next year, and how did we do? And sometimes we may not meet those objectives. I don't think that is if we go about maybe approach of reviewing goals and strategic priorities rather than performance per se, we get away from the, personalities associated with it, and it becomes more of did we meet these criteria? And if we didn't, what happened that we didn't? Well, COVID happened, for example. That would obviously, if another pandemic happened, that's probably going to throw a monkey wrench in some of our strategic priorities. Well, we can address that then. We can say we were able to get some of this done, but not all of it because we had to handle these other things. Okay, does it mean then that it goes back on the list next year? Or really, we found that it wasn't as important because it didn't rise to the top, so maybe that isn't something we need to include moving forward the next year, and we look at something else. I'm not married to one way or the other. I think there are a couple of different ways we can go about this, and I was just hoping that we could have a conversation about that to see where our thoughts are. Straight up review, communication, agree, disagree, so, whatever, 1 through 5 kind of thing, or is it a goal, goal B, goal C, goal D? Here are the goals, how did they meet them, and what would we like to see, what worked really well, what maybe didn't work really well, and how does that shape where we move for the next year? And then create the foundation to do this on an annual basis, maybe after elections, because I think it would be incumbent upon a new council, if there's new people coming in, to help create and set those goals. So maybe it's a December, January kind of thing annually, where we set it for the year, and then they review it, and we set it, and we just kind of go on that cycle. I don't know, but I open it up. I am open to hearing ideas and thoughts. I just think that if we're going to, hold our city manager, and this has nothing to do with this city manager, it's really for any city manager. If we're going to move forward as a community, as a growing community, as a maturing community, we ought to focus on more than just the day-to-day and think about strategic vision and direction and some bigger goal items that we'd like to see accomplished collectively. Maybe it brings us together in that way too, so that we can talk about, hey, we want to help support our city manager accomplish these goals, so we need to set the budget for that. We need to reinforce that this is something we'd like to see done. And if it fails, I guess it fails and we move on. I don't think it hurts us necessarily, but I certainly would like to see us do a little bit more in that area, especially since we talk about it in our contract with all of our city managers. We talk about performance evaluation, and to my knowledge, it hasn't been done. And I think we have an obligation to our employee. He is our employee, just as the department heads have obligations to their employees as they review them going throughout the year.
I think if you don't know to which port you're sailing, the wind is favorable. So I like the idea of having goal setting and measuring, what are the goals, how have we done? I completely agree with you, Tim, about the whole, praise in public and chastise in private. That's, my mom was a postmaster. She raised me the same way. So I do agree with that, but, I also think that all of us, and Mr. Waugh and Mr. Van Wagner, we're all in this understanding that we're under a little bit more of a fishbowl than we would like to be, and that's part of what we signed up for, is to have that public transparency. And so much of what we do talk about has to be done in private only because sensitive things often are discussed behind closed doors. And how do you present that, and how do you not create fear, and how do you not, those things happen. And if we don't have some sort of process for transparency, then it will, even if there is nothing going on behind the scenes, it will give the impression there could be something going on behind the scenes. So I think that having something that is a standard for review is a wise thing to do. I think I'm a big fan of let them be vindicated, sunlight's the greatest disinfectant. So if you'll either be validated or vindicated if you just let it come out, whatever it is. And to your point, if something doesn't work as well, why not? Why didn't it work so well? So I'm for having a set of standards, and I think that, once we're gone, and I mean from office, but there's also from this earth, depends on your perspective. Once we're gone, what stays behind? And so if we create something that helps set the city on a trajectory of accountability and transparency and goal setting for the future, I think that that's good. Feedback wise, I actually think having a twice a year approach would be good. I've said before to people that the public speaks through their elections, so I appreciate the, potentially setting something in December or January post-election, because maybe the people elected the people they elected because they wanted to see a change, and that might be why that person's there. But also avoiding the politics that often fall into the seat of the city manager by having a mid-year review. You say, okay, how are we doing with the people who have chosen to keep that manager? So maybe there's not so much fear on the staff side of what might be the outcome of the elections. Because, we had a good review in June, but this January a new council, and then it's evident it was the new council versus the city manager. And that could help the city manager in his or her new search. So I don't like the idea, and I think we're on the same page of having some sort of public flogging. I don't think that would be healthy for anybody. But I think I like your point about how it could bring us together on what are the things by which we're measuring the city manager. I think it's good for him or her, in this case him, to know what are the standards that we're applying collectively. And then if individually we go slightly off, it's like we can hold each other accountable as well to, maybe we're asking too much of the city manager because we've reached an agreement. So in theory, in concept and in theory, I'm in support of what you're asking. I think it's a healthy thing for the city.
I think we're constantly doing reviews of our city manager.
I do.
I mean, we could do it formally with a questionnaire, and then how does that questionnaire get weighted? It depends on how you want to look at it. You could have it weighted on the political side or the non-political side. So, you know, we have a lot of power as a city council. You know, 3 votes and you're gone.
Yeah.
So we're constantly evaluating you in what you do and how you act towards our individual needs as opposed to our collective needs. You know, we all have our own particular things that we like, that you like, that Ms. Strange likes, and Mr. Benz likes, right? And we all try to get our point to you, and I think your function is to get the cats all together, which is difficult at times, you know, it's hard to corral everybody. And I think that's an important thing. Evaluations are, you know, there's many cities in Florida that don't have any there's many that do. Does it have any real meaning to it when you think about the power that the council has? You know, whether you have a good evaluation or bad, if you don't get the votes, you know, I mean, that's the bottom line. So, I mean, I think valuations are good, but I think it's, you know, how it gets weighted and, you know, how the questions are asked and how the questions are phrased really is going to determine what the meaning of the evaluation is.
Sure.
You know, like, have you stopped beating your wife consistently? Yes or no? You know, I mean, obviously that would be a bad question.
If that's a question on the evaluation form, we've got bigger problems.
So you know what I'm trying to say? How do you, the
Yeah.
questions can really be, you know, and who's going to be the person that determines the question? Is that us, or is that a consultant that would do that? You know, we each have our own idea of what the question should be, but maybe we're not the right person. You know, like if you want to get heart surgery, we're not going to go to a podiatrist. So same thing with this, is we want to get this worded correctly, and does it really have meaning in the long run? Or is it just, are we just spinning wheels just for the sake of spinning some wheels?
You bring up some points, do you mind if I jump?
Go ahead.
You bring up some points that I think warrant insertion. Is something about what you said made me think about the very personal relationship between the council member and the city manager.
Right.
And perhaps there are questions that might help someone who maybe isn't as either open or doesn't have the best interpersonal skills to
Right.
be a better communicator with the city manager. So I think there's a degree of potential relationship building between, you know, a rookie politician and, you know, potentially a seasoned city manager, or maybe a rookie city manager with a seasoned politician, right? I mean, it could go either way, but I think that something in what you said made me think about the personal connection and the relationship building, which might be where there could be a sense of fear. I could envision a sense of fear by people, different positions, looking at the idea of evaluating a city manager publicly. How there could be a personal connection versus the professional connection, which I very much like as an open process. Because it's not about the personal, it's not about my relationship with Mr. Van Wagner or your relationship with Mr. Van Wagner. It's about our relationship to the public and the effectiveness of our chief executive in effectuating the vision that we have articulated for the public. And I think that part is where I think the evaluation provides the most public impact and significance. But I also think something else that might be dancing around in this conversation is the potential to improve the effectiveness of the communication between each individual council member and the city manager. Because I think your joke about herding the cats is actually probably what he lives on a day-to-day basis, is what I imagine. I can't imagine what it's like to have 5 people who are all very different. And then you're also having to manage your direct reports who are also very different. And it's a wide net that he has to cast on a day-to-day basis. So I think anything that we could put in place, and I would actually welcome his feedback at some point on that, especially the personal relationship, how that could be better, how we could put systems in place to help make that more streamlined. And he might say it's perfect. Maybe I'm misreading the room, but we're all human, so I kind of think not. But I think, Mr. Bain, what you're asking is for a public, a broad public, how do we measure the success of what I would describe as the effectiveness of the execution of the vision of the council?
Yeah, versus a annual review that is a little bit more about
The personal.
the personal and it's always going to be subjective, but at least the subjectiveness, if it's more of a review of goals or strategic priorities set by this council, that you have you have the rails, you have the guardrails there. It's goal A is blah, blah, blah. How did they meet? How did they meet it? Did they meet it to the level that we had expected? Did they exceed that? Did they not? What were the factors that went into why they didn't? And it really is about that specific criterion versus more open-ended, where then maybe some of those more interpersonal kinds of things can be interwoven in, where it becomes, well, I don't think that this city manager executes well, you know, and
Right.
and then
Which
it kind of,
can start to
and then it
go.
veers off
Yeah.
versus a specific kind of more guardrailed, we're talking about goals A, B, C, D, and how did they do in those goals in the last year? And I actually kind of like the idea of a mid-year and post-election, to have it as a twice-a-year process, so that it doesn't get mired in strictly the election cycle, which we can't avoid completely, but if we can try to show that we truly are trying to make this about the strategic direction of the city, and regardless of who the 5 people are in these chairs and who the one person is in that chair, we always should be coming together to figure out what are those strategic priorities and how are we assessing the accomplishment of those.
Yeah, I mean, I think about like the financial audit being one thing that I would wanna see in the.
We talked about, yeah, that's something that's been talked about quite a bit.
There is, that you're not, it's not a subjective thing. Did you file the audit? Was it accepted? Was it timely? Did we win the award? I mean, these are things that are, I think, really important for the financial health of the city, that are easily measured. And then, just as a citizen, when I observed us go through, as a city, a process where that wasn't done, and I'm sitting in the audience, much like what you're describing, going, how are we not having a review? What happens when these things don't happen? But then it becomes, I think, from what I observed from the audience, when the time came to review the city manager, it felt like, well, we're concerned about it being personal, versus if we establish criteria when there's no conflict and no drama, then it becomes easier to identify what those measures are and to provide some sort of feedback. So, I mean, I would say, I don't know that we're there yet. I'm in the middle of scheduling, so I might be a little higher execute than I should be, but I would say things like the financial audit should be something that would be, I would think should be on any sort of review. Was it done? It's on the finance side. Police, is crime going up, is crime going down? I mean, there are things we could kind of look at each department and say, what are our goals in each of these departments? And identify those and then visit them twice a year. I mean, what a healthy thing for any business to say, this is where we want to go. And at midway through the year, how are we doing? At the end of the year, how are we doing? Is that what you're kind of envisioning?
I think that I like the direction of going to a review of goals and priorities rather than an open-ended evaluation. Because then it becomes something that I think can have other positive effects. How it brings the council together to execute and help the city manager execute on those priorities and goals for the city. It also allows us to, if it's something that requires staffing or budgeting items, we talk about that through those processes, and we explain to the public why we're allocating funds or not allocating funds, why we're allocating staff or not reallocating staff to accomplish those goals. It allows us to tie those things back in together that we all agreed are priorities for us moving forward. And some of them can be routine, like the financial audit. I mean, I think the charter says our charter actually says that they have to do they're required to do a financial presentation annually. But maybe a goal could be, well, maybe we want to see something like a state of the city presentation that included that, but also included other departments. And lots of communities do some sort of state of the city presentation or address that is done. And maybe we want to do something like that. So it could be accomplished through that goal of establishing something like that. But, or it could just be as simple as, you do need to meet a couple of these rudimentary kinds of things annually. And did you meet them? Yes or
Right.
no.
Yeah, objective.
But then here are some of the bigger picture, bigger ticket, dream lofty things that we want to set out there for the next year or beyond.
Yes, I do believe what you all are saying, you all are on the same page. I know I had tried to do that with the previous council, but no one had an appetite of wanting to have standards of an evaluation because they didn't want to do it in the public. And I hate that we have to do it in the public, so to speak. But I do think we do need to be fair. Whatever our goals that we come up with for our city manager to accomplish, I don't know about twice a year. I mean, I see the merits of that, and I see the other side of, I don't know. Because some jobs do that, some jobs don't. I'm kind of on the fence with that. I do know that it is more fair for him to know what is expected than just to say, well, you didn't do A and B, but we never told you what A and B was. That's not fair. And I think we can use some of the other cities that our attorney gave us evaluations to use some of those as an example, and then we could tweak whatever we want on there and whatnot, because I do like how you said, some things are subjective, some things are, but that's where I'm at.
Okay, well, let me, I go back a couple of points I heard you all make, which, the twice a year, I don't think we need to do evaluation twice a year. I think one of the good things would be to every 6 months give him a, I guess, where you are type evaluation, which is something, I've had to do many reviews when I was in the military, and that's one of the things that we started in the Air Force. Every 6 months we had to come sit a troop down every 6 months and tell him where he stands and what the expectations are in the next 6 months when your real evaluation came out. And so I have no problem with the 6 months review and everything, but not overall. It's more or less where you stand at this point, where you need to be to get to this point. Okay, once we establish the criteria that we're gonna be looking at. Okay. And here's the other problem, as Mr. Peterson said, that one of the problems I think we was having with the previous administrations is the fact that each one of us have our own somewhat criteria, expectations of a person. So for us to sit here and try to say, and mold it into our own expectation, it's gonna be very difficult, okay? And that's why we was having a lot of the problems before and everything, because we went out, and like I said, several times we went out and had all this stuff pulled in off the web and everything, and then everything there, we get so bogged down. And one of the thoughts I had about it is maybe we, as council members, need to get out of that process, maybe somewhat, and quit trying to put our own personal touch on it. And I thought about having the lawyer go out and do this and come back and give us a couple of proposals with the criterias in there. And we do this because guess what? As you said before, election gonna bring about different results, and we're gonna be gone. The next council member come in, we may have a different set of, they may be looking at things different, want to change the whole process. But I think if we get ourselves out of the process somewhat and get a neutral party to set up a standard that every council member, every person will be judged by from here on out, not just on our standards we do. It worked, because that's the way every job I ever worked on, they always came in, it was a standard process there in place, been there for years. we was evaluated on. They're in the military and all that. I never understood how they came up with them 9 criteria they used to judge me on every year, rate me on every year, but hey, they was there and of course, we knew each area that, we were gonna be rated on by having them criteria. So we knew what we need to work on. You suggested about where the audit was done. Okay, so, hey, we maybe have a criteria in there for budgeting, okay? I think in his contract, it's a lot of guidelines put in the contract up, some expectations, so we can go back to the contract that we molded ourselves, been molded over here, and pull some of them areas out there and buckle them. Hey, topic could be budgeting, okay? Another one, public relations, okay, in these different areas. And there's a lot of different subtopics and be under each one of those, so I truly definitely think for as, well, I agree it's not so budgeting, but I would say finance, okay, because that's one of the most important aspects of his job is finance, okay? So underneath finance, okay, how did he do with the budget? Was the audit done? And all these different things can be done, okay? In public relations, as I say, what's some other areas that we can buckle some of these things underneath? We cover all these things, but all this, I think most of them is in his contract right now, a lot of these different areas.
Can you look at that, or are you looking at it now? I am interested.
I'm
in
looking
what-
at other things in our charter about the city manager right now.
Do you have a couple of things that, since you're on your computer, that in the charter and the contract, and at the very least, we could start with what have we already agreed to
Sure.
or all submitted to, and then those become standards that we could look at?
I can tell you what the charter says right now about powers and duties. So looking at section 32, it says that the city manager shall be the CEO and head of administration, be responsible for the following things, and then it lists 8 things. First is appointment, and when necessary for the good of the city, remove all officers and employees of the city. That's confirmed in your employee policies, which you've approved by resolution as well. Number 2 is prepare the budget annually and submit it to the council, be responsible for its administration after adoption. Number 3 is prepare and submit to the council, as of the end of the fiscal year, a complete report on the finances and administrative activities of the city, which is, I think, what Councilmember Bain talked about earlier. Number 4, keep the council advised of the financial condition and future needs of the city, making such recommendations as may seem desirable. Number 5, attend all meetings of the city council and of its committees and keep the council advised of the activities of his office with the right to take part in the discussion but without having a vote. Number 6, perform such other duties as may be prescribed under this charter or as may be required by ordinance or resolution of the council. Number 7, city manager may appoint a qualified person as purchasing agent, subject to approval of the council, by whom all purchases of supplies shall be made. All purchases, sales, and contracts shall conform to the regulations of the council. And finally, number 8, fix the salary of officers and employees according to the wage schedule approved by the council. And then it does, in subsection B of section 32, talk about managing and controlling city-owned public utilities, management and operation of all public works, charitable and correctional institutions, manage or inspect water, lighting, power, and transportation enterprises of the city, manage and control the use, construction, improvement, repair, and maintenance facilities of the city, including parks, playgrounds, and public gyms and social centers, and shall manage and supervise all public improvements, works, and undertakings of the city. And that's what your charter says.
So, listen to all that, we can narrow it down as you were reading, I was coming up with a couple, like I said, one with finance, with all your financial information. You talk about the hiring and all that, so that can fall under human resources and everything, how do you handle human resources, so. Procurement and all this, yeah, so, and procurement can kind of go under your finances as well, I guess. But that's what I'm saying, we got a lot of things sitting there in the contract that we can probably work off of, okay? And everything, and come up with how many areas you want to look at, see?
Well,
What's the areas you're important to you? I know the public communication and public relation would be one thing. I think there need to be, so the public, how is he with the public? Okay, and everything, because one of the things I've learned sitting on this council, we react a lot towards the city manager from a lot of the feedback we do get from the public, okay? I've noticed that's one of the things we do quite a bit. If, in prior years I've been around the council and the 3 other city managers I've been around, I used to hear a lot of reaction to the city manager based upon what's coming in out from the public and everything, so, public perception. So, yeah, that, to me, that's the important part, because that's a big part of his job, is being out in the public and relating with the public as well, so, but that's what I'm saying, how do we come up with these things, and do we wanna be the one, because what I see is important, may not be as important to you, and everyone else can have different views.
Well, I look at it like if I was to dismantle the federal government, which I've given some thought to, I would start with the Constitution, and those, the departments identified in the Constitution would be the things that I would say should remain. And my personal philosophy would be save the national parks, and after that, I'm pretty much done. That's me personally. But I think that starting with the Constitution is a good start. In this case, we have our charter, and we have his contract, so we have law.
And really, what your contract basically says is he shall perform the things in the charter and your laws.
That's it. There's
So
nothing
there's
new
nothing
added
really
to it.
additional.
Okay, so the charter, so I think if we start, I would suggest we could start with the items in the charter, and I would actually suggest that maybe a good exercise would be for the 5 of us to look at those parts of the charter, to say, okay, finance, for example, like, okay, how do you measure? What are the goals for each one of these departments? You know, and then we could look at that together, because I think it was your point, Ms. Myers, if he doesn't know how he's gonna be measured, who said it? Someone else, yeah. If he doesn't know how he's gonna be measured, then how can you hold it against him, right? So if we can start, and I hear you about, you know, different personalities, and feel free to use it on me. If I put my junk on it, just, that's my personal opinion, let's take that out. We, I think, have an obligation to the public to put the public first, and what does the public want? So I think it's incumbent upon us 5 to agree, even if we have personal goals and desires, which we certainly do, we're humans, is what do we all agree, this is our unified path forward. And we might have other things we like, but on this unified path, we'll stay together. And I think that becomes the very clear kind of the tie that binds, so to speak, for the city manager, is this is the path forward. And what I really like about this process that you've introduced, Mr. Bain, is that hopefully this rope, if you will, or this tie will last beyond all of us, and it will move the city in a direction that is firmly grounded. So I think if we start, I would suggest we start with the charter, and each identify, maybe we could come up with 3, no more than 5 criteria that could maybe be used to measure success, what we identify as success in each of those areas of the charter. And then we could maybe bring this back to say, okay, this is the standard that we suggest using. It sounds like a targeted goal might be, we could perhaps look at a pre-budget type timeline. If you like the idea, if we all agree a review is good, maybe before a formal evaluation, or I'm a fan of reviews, but if it causes anxiety, that's not the goal. You know, but if we do this kind of measure before we budget, and then after we budget, when the fiscal year is over, you evaluate it, I think that makes sense. But if we start with, what does the charter say we do? How do we measure success? We agree on, maybe there's 3 things in the end when we're done. Maybe it's 2 or 1, but, you know, whatever that number is that we agree on. And then he has something that we can measure against. We can all measure against. It's our own success. He's just the one that has to do the work. So we're really measuring our own success in the end. But, you know, what do we think about that direction as like a next step of looking at the charter and coming up with 3 to 5 criteria. And maybe that's something we could do electronically. What are the rules on how we could share that information?
I mean, it depends on what you mean. So if you're talking about everyone gets an evaluation sheet.
Let's say the
On the-
first thing, finance, we talked about finance, so I might say, okay, 5 measures of finance, did we get our books reconciled monthly? That would be something I would put in there. Is our budget adopted annually and balanced? Did we stay under budget at the end of the year? Did we submit our audit, and did we get the GFOA award? Those would be, I would say, these are the 5 criteria that I like. And then we would, you might have 5 different ones, you might have 5 different ones, but we might find that there are like 2 that really we all agree on.
They can be compiled and circulated. I mean, there's
And
nothing
how
wrong
does
with
that
that.
work with the sunshine?
Someone can compile it. I mean, so for example, Okeechobee County does that, where all the commissioners take a form, they submit it, they evaluate it, they write it up, they submit it to the city clerk, and then the city clerk compiles them and makes them available for your joint review. So in that way, your review hasn't affected another review, you get them all at the same time, and it avoids any sunshine issues.
But each one of them, let me understand what you're saying. Each one of them have their own, have one specific, each one of them get the same review.
Correct, it's the
So-
same
so review
criteria to grade
And then
on.
they grade, so.
Correct.
So it's not being done in public, basically, it's being done somewhat in private, and then it's given to them.
Yeah.
Okay, and everything, so.
And it could be just, and then afterwards, if y'all wanted, you could present them in the aggregate publicly, or
Right,
have it in the
right.
agenda packet, however you want.
Right, well.
But I do want to be responsible, because there might be a miscommunication here, I could see it go both ways. What I'm asking about specifically is how do we come up with the criteria?
Oh,
Right.
I see.
And so, the public versus private, I'm mostly concerned about sunshine. I think that once that information is compiled, there's a potential that one of us could write something that the others don't understand, because we've done it in a silo. And that if we bring it back together, and we might find in this area, we literally all said the same thing, and these are the 3 criteria, and that's easy. But we might find in another area, there's like 15 different criteria, and, okay, now, first of all, now we know where he's got anxiety. Right?
Yeah.
Because we're on different pages. So then how do we narrow that down? And I think that has to be done.
You're talking about the
before.
selection of the criteria themselves.
This
Correct.
criteria, she's referring to the criteria
Yeah.
themselves, but that's why I think I suggested that maybe we have the lawyer to keep our personal feelings somewhat out of it, have him go back and look at it all and break it down into different categories. He present that to us, we can go through them, say yay and nay and no. But another reason I say that is because with an HR background, that's what my degree is, management, HR and everything. I know it's also still some legalities there of what we can and cannot say and do to keep it, make sure we keep ourselves legal. Having. And I know he will probably, whatever we put together, you have to go through and make sure we legal and we're not advised.
I don't know that there's any, just making sure I'm on the same page. I don't think there's any way of getting around y'all voting on the criteria.
Well, once you
know.
put them together, we can
Yeah,
come back,
so
you know.
one thing we do, one method that we have on the Judicial Nominating Commission, so there's judicial nominating, anytime there's a judicial vacancy in Florida, every circuit has one. I'm on the one here in the Ninth Circuit, and we'll get 30 applications, and we've got to determine how do we rank them
Right.
and to send them to the governor's office. And what we'll do is, the first thing we do is, if anyone has a vote for who wants a name in contention, we want to know who the names are, who's interested in the names. And then we'll have a vote for each one of the names. And then there could be a motion for, okay, I want to accept all the names that have 2 or more votes. We send that list to the governor. Similarly, you could say, okay, let's tally up who likes this criterion, that criterion, that criterion. Anything that has 3 or more people who want that as a criterion, put it on the
That's
evaluation
fair.
form.
Yeah.
You know, and in that way, you have the majority for each of the criterion that you put on the list. It's just an idea, but it works well for us.
I like that idea.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's more
good.
fair, because I just want us to be fair.
So what we could do is create the menu of the criteria, and then maybe y'all give tally marks or something, and then we compile that, and you can choose to vote on it at a meeting or something,
Yeah, I
what you
like that.
want.
So you would be the one that would generate it?
It could be me, it
Right,
could be
I mean, you could-
any, it could be Dan,
It'd
could be,
Well, it would be impartial, right, if you would,
Yeah.
because you would be looking at the, you know, what it has in there, what the criteria is, and then you could take that and consolidate it down into specific goals.
I mean, I'll tell you what I would do based on what you've discussed so far is I would take the charter criteria, you know, I mean, and try as best I could to enumerate the 8 things.
Right.
And then look at the forms that I sent you, that Nadine procured, and give you guys the biggest selection possible to
Right.
maximize your discretion and flexibility.
I like that idea.
So are we thinking that we would do that in front, as a result of that then, set
Yes.
some actual goals based off of that kind of
Well,
conversation? Because I think the one thing that, the one thing I'm hearing that might be missing from all of that, and I don't want this to sound like I don't support that. I just am saying, the one thing I'm hearing that may be missing from that is any type of goal setting for the city manager. But I think we could start with that, have that as a base, and then be able to then say, okay, based off of this, based off of all this information, this criteria, these reviews, this feedback, here are now the goals we'd like to set for the next year. And then we move forward with a process by which we evaluate those goals. This could be the first step to get to that point where then we create the goals and then annually review those goals and set new. And if it doesn't, again, I'm totally okay if it doesn't work. We fail fast, we learn from it, and we move on. I mean, this isn't brain surgery, so, you know, no one should hopefully be injured or not be with us as a result of it. You know, I think let's not be afraid to try it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, tweak it or get rid of it and do something completely different. But I would just like to see us try, and I would support moving forward with what we've talked about to then get to the point of setting those goals.
The only thing that I would say gives me some anxiety around the process as it's been described thus far is I'm not a big fan of, I hope you can relate to what I'm about to say, kind of a democratic tally, if you will. I think that when we're talking about the vision of the city and how we're gonna measure the city managers moving forward with the vision of the city, we may be dealing with things or ideas that have weight that's not obvious either in the initial presentation of it or the way it's described or the way it might appear on paper versus the ability for us to have discussion about the importance of some of these issues. You might say, I think having businesses that are veteran-owned is important. I might dismiss that. We might have a debate, and I might come to an agreement that, oh, there's really good reason for that. And I think the function of the adversarial process and the debate, especially for us having such a unique and diverse council, is likely to lead to better results if we have the ability to discuss with one another. And then take a vote, if you will. I'm not sure if it ultimately needs to be voted on, but, you know, I think my suggestion in the process would be to take the criteria raw, not ask us to revisit it until we've had a chance to talk to each other about it again. So that then maybe we're voting on it if we want to have a sense of, you know, we've done it in private, if you will, although I'm not even sure if we're allowed to do that. We might have to be publicly accountable for how we were to vote on these items. I don't know.
well,
If we're setting criteria, are we able to do that without speaking? I think these 3 are the top 3 things, or can I do that by silent vote, or how does that work?
I guess I'm not quite understanding.
well, let me see. Well, maybe I need to ask that question too, because maybe I misunderstood what you were saying. I thought what you were saying is you sit down and you come up with all these criteria, you feed them to us.
Yeah.
You give them to us, we can go through and highlight the ones that each one is mean the most to each one of us.
Or you
And
want
then
it
we
all.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
want it all, and then we come back, put them together, we can, come back and.
I would show
and
you the
say which-
tally,
which
or
one
someone would
ranked
present the
higher,
tally, yeah.
And then we agree upon, hey, this was number 1, 2, 3, do we all agree with
It's
these?
totally up to y'all, yeah.
Okay, after you choose out of the
Yeah, the
list he
criteria.
compiled, after each one of us gets to choose from each, the list he compiled, and then we tally them, not so much as tally everything.
Exactly, so
Before
that's
we
the
come
way
up
I
with
can do it
final
outside
point.
the sunshine,
Yeah.
is I can at least show you what you're interested
Okay.
in based on what you highlight on the criteria list.
Mm-hmm.
And then just like in any procurement process, you're not bound by that at all. You
Right.
could say, 4 people voted for that, but I think it's trash, I'm not,
No.
Yeah.
and it's just meant, and by the way, I'm not wedded to anything. I'm just throwing, the process works in a different context, and that may have been something that you would consider.
Yeah,
I
we would,
like what
before
you're
we,
saying. I just think we need to keep it simple. I don't think we need to complicate it, because that brings anxiety too. I think what you said, and then what Brian said about, talking verbally about like the goals and the objectives. I think we have the standard of what you're saying, and then we come back, okay, now what is the goals that we want that are realistic to give to him, and we come in agreement.
And you
That
can
just
add those
keep it-
too.
Yeah, and keep
I mean-
it simple. Yeah.
And are we distinguishing, when you're talking about the goals and the standards, are we saying there's objective standards? and
Yes.
there's subjective goals?
Yes.
Or maybe non-essential goals, from the, not obviously essential, like, doing your books is a fundamental part of government.
Right.
You gotta do it,
Right,
in every business, but
right.
whether you have extraordinary customer service,
Well,
and then how do you
yeah.
measure that?
And I almost look at something like complete the fiscal audit every year as an expectation.
Yeah,
Yeah, me
It's,
too.
it's a requirement. A
Right.
goal would be how we, like, if we wanted a formal citywide presentation, whether it's a state of the city or not, but if we wanted to say, we want this, we expect you to, it's done every year. You're required by our city charter to complete this report,
Right.
okay?
But getting-
However, the goal would be, okay, you're required to do this, it's an expectation, but here's the goal that we have for you in terms of what we want as a result of that.
The aspiration.
The aspiration to
Yeah.
get to
Yep.
what this could do for our community, or how we could present this, what it could lead to beyond just meeting the expectation of doing the report.
So, for
Yes.
example, doing the report is mandatory, getting it online so that the public can interact with the live
That's a goal.
financials.
That could be a goal,
That's a
that could be an
goal.
aspirational goal.
Aspirational
Or,
goal,
a public presentation, or what, those would all be
Right.
the
Those would be
aspirational types of
aspirational,
goals
yeah.
that we would create to try to get to the next level of,
Yeah.
are we just meeting expectation, or are we actually trying to advance and move us forward in some sort of way?
I like that you used that expression, the meeting expectations. I feel like this might have come from a college at some point. I feel like I've heard that before. But it's a great standard of,
Yeah.
these are the expectations, because I felt as a citizen, like there were times the expectations weren't met, and there was never, and they were obvious, and it's like, when are we going to assess this, because we have to deal with the thing. And so I like the idea of having, these are the expectations, this is the basic standard, and then here's the aspirational. I think that's great. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing our attorney or somebody is going
attorney
to
is gonna
start
be the
with,
one right
why
there.
don't you start
Cindy
for us?
said.
Because we need, I don't wanna filter, I don't wanna lack of understanding on this, in the charter, these are the things that must be done.
Right.
If you can get that list, and then it goes to a staff member to help us, then we come up with our, what do we wanna say, 5 at the most standards, what we think,
Goals,
and goals of these are the like.
criterias.
Criteria and then the goals.
And Mr. Waugh, I think, of course, I know you're a lawyer and everything, but I know we got Nadine back there with, HR, so I know you'll be calling upon her, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Every
Like I
day.
say, that's
Every
one of the other fears I always had, because like I say, my background is in human resource management and everything as well, so I know there's a lot, and I've been out of it for a while, but I know there's still a lot of laws we gotta abide by.
Listen, I'm never gonna try and get on her bad side, so we'll do what we can.
Okay, so,
And is it okay, I think too, to go back to the point of, I think someone made about hearing from our current city manager in this process. And
Yes.
I'm cognizant of the fact of, the managerial philosophy of including your staff in the evaluation process, but I'm one where I believe it actually is beneficial to get feedback from the staff member that you're also providing feedback to. And I'm just curious if you have any general thoughts, number one, or thoughts or feedback on that kind of shell of a process we just talked about here and kind of put in potential place moving forward, so that we know that now, so that we can try to address some of that and make that, because I want this to be successful personally, and I think all of us collectively want it to be successful.
Sure.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot that way,
Well,
but
I was definitely gonna give him a chance, but I want to
Yeah.
make sure we was all in somewhat agreement before we open up and, okay, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Well, I think your ideas for Mr. Waugh and Mr. Mathis are a good idea to get their input with that. One of my biggest angst I deal with is crowning winners and losers. And what I mean by that is when a vote takes place, I'm obligated to fulfill that responsibility from the council. And sometimes some of the council members, it's difficult that are on the other side of the vote. And I'm just trying to fulfill what's been voted on. And so I would say it would be fair to me to say that I'm fulfilling the majority of the wishes of the council. And sometimes that's not gonna work individually versus collectively. And so I would say that would be one of the things you have to consider. I may not do something an individual likes, but I'm honoring the system that's been set up, and I'm doing what the majority of the council wants. And that's one of my biggest struggles, is creating angst or frustration for some of you on some issues that perhaps didn't go the way you wanted them to. I'm just trying to fulfill what's put in front of me, and that's, I kind of feel sometimes back and forth. I will say that it helped. You all were very honoring and going out of your way to make sure that you're communicating with me rather than the staff, and that's empowering, so I can do my job. And I feel like all 5 of you have been doing that since our discussion, and I'm grateful for that. If I were you, I would say communication would need to be one of the high areas of critique. And it would be with the council, it would be working with other government entities. I mean, me and the mayor were just at a mayor's luncheon. I mean, there's things like that you need communication skills of some degree to be successful in this thing. And relationships matter. So I would think, I don't know how you grade that, but whomever is in this seat has to be good at relationships and working with people. Even if they don't agree with each other, there's got to be some mutual respect that takes place so that people are willing to work together. So it's got to be with Lake County, it's got to be your state representatives, it's got to be your federal representatives. And I think that's something you should look at even beyond me, is communication has to be a key. I'm not sure how you communicate with the entire city and citizens effectively. I mean, maybe it's a state of a union, but you're only gonna have a certain percentage of people, so I'm not sure how you would critique that personally, but you, by your own individual encounters, could easily critique whether communication is taking place to your satisfaction or not, and you could communicate. And I'll just say this in fairness to all of you, you all have a scorecard, whether you realize that or not already. And some of you tell me about it publicly, and some of you tell me about it privately. But there's a scorecard already going, so whether you think it's 6 months or not, it's pretty much weekly, I hear from you. Some of you even more often than that. And that I'm okay with that, but I'm just want to be a little realistic with this conversation. There's a scorecard going. It's not every 6 months. It's every week. It's every council meeting. It's every workshop. There's communication going. It's in reviews. So there's constant communication of some degree. And I would say that's even ramped up even into a higher level now that you all are working with me more to work with me rather than the staff directly. So I think you're communicating with me quite well. And again, I would just say you gotta give me some grace, because some of you want this and some of you want that, and they're polar opposite. And both, this one's frustrated and this one's frustrated. What I'm trying to keep, my role is to be neutral and to try to just stay right in the middle. And then once the majority of the council speaks, that's where I have to go. And that's how I try to handle this role. And I tell my staff, we're Switzerland until there's a vote. We try to be honoring of everybody, listen to everybody's input, and then once you all speak, that's it. And that's how I try to do my role here, is just be honoring. I consult the city attorney a whole lot. I consult HR a whole lot. I consult Scott about things. I consult Freddie about things. Mr. Mayor, one of the things you encourage me to do is trust your staff, and I talk to them a whole lot. So the Bible says there's safety in a multitude of counselors. I talked to Mr. Mathis, and of course, all of you. So I hope I answered your question, but I think communication is one of the biggest pieces that you need to look at, in my mind.
And I'm really, I think you said something that hopefully strikes all of us, in the sense that this is more about a framework for whomever's in these seats. That it's not just the five of us individually and you as a city manager. Yes, it is today. There is that there is that reality. But if we can create a structure that is absent of personalities, that's not easy, but if we can try to get there, it allows us to have something in place that really benefits the community in the city, and in turn, the people who are then in those chairs at that time as they're doing it. I got that from what you just said, so I'm appreciative of that.
And I can truly understand your feeling, but you have to react upon the vote of the council, because as the mayor, I sit here a lot of times, I'm not happy with some of the votes and the way things go, but then I'm sitting here and I'm still got to sign off on everything in the city,
With
okay?
your signature, literally.
Stuff coming through procurement, I may not be happy with it, but hey, that's my job, is to sign off whether I like it or not. Okay, and I think I signed most, 90% of the documents that come through the city, I have to sign them, agree with them or not. Other thing you said, I think I mentioned it earlier about communication. I think one of the first things that's, conversation we ever had right, if you was put in, as interim, was the fact that I expect you to be the voice of the city. Okay, I think that was one of the first things I told you. I expect you to be the voice of the city. Anything came up, I expected you to do that, okay? News, spurs or whatever, and if you couldn't be there, then I will be there, but I wasn't the one that I wanted to be out and doing this newscast and speaking for the city. I've always felt like that's the city manager's job. And so I think I mentioned earlier about communication, public relations and everything, because to me, that's one of the key areas, communicating. And I know, as he mentioned, we go to all these different meetings all the time with city managers and other mayors and county commissioners and all these different things. So it's communicating and working with other agencies is very key to this thing. So I totally agree with that, and I understand where you're coming from. And I just always felt like if we can somewhat try to get ourselves out of it and keep it our personal feelings. I guess I'm trying to look for a way to be neutral, somewhat neutral, without letting each one of our personal aspects get in. That's why I like to have a neutral party come in and design these things for us. Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to work with Christian on this. We can get the 8 criteria, and then we can work together and come up with what's below expectations, what's meeting expectations, what's exceeding expectations. So you have real criteria to go over, and we do that. We can bring that back to you.
And I do realize he's graded every day, because I tell you, if I don't like something, I would tell him. I'd sit down and have conversations, and I've always been the type of person, I try to be honest. I always ask everybody to be honest and tell me exactly what you feel, and let me be a big boy and live with it or die with it, whatever. And I always try to be honest with people, with my feelings. So So we do have our times we communicate, but like I say, that one of the first things I told him was communication. So that is one criteria area I would definitely agree with him on, is and the finances as well. Okay, those are two of the biggest things we have to worry about. Nobody else, we got a lot of public here, and this is a public forum, and like I said, we were not gonna be taking any action, so what, voting on anything, but I would like to have some feedback from the public. Anybody on the public want to give any feedback? Wayne, is this microphone live? Thank you.
How we doing?
All righty, sir, how about yourself?
No, I'm
Can I
good.
Get your name and address, please.
Brian K. Hess, 1166 Short Street, Clermont.
All right.
I would just say you guys did pretty good today. It wasn't painful.
That's meeting expectations.
But you know, what you really got to do is you got to line on things. So as a group, as leaders, you have to line. And you pick what they are, he'll get them done, I'm sure. The one thing that's missing is all the stuff these guys got to do that you don't know they got to do, that they keep you guys in good shape, out of trouble. So it's a big job they do. They're open to the public. They have to listen. They got to want the truth. They got to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Joe Famasi, 2693 Jumping Jack Way. I really appreciate the professionalism and the cooperation here today. This was a big change from the last, and I appreciate that everybody was on board today in a very goal-oriented way to come up with criterias. I thank you today, Mayor, for being outstanding and being on board here today. I appreciate it. I really appreciate that the council members are trying to come up with a fair and precise way to bring this to about. And I appreciate Mr. Baines saying that this is not only from today, this will be from now on. I'd like to say a few things about Mr. Van Wagner, the city manager. Some of the things that I've notated as far as watching him, the financials that are on the website, on the city website, any citizen can go there and look at where the city stands financially. That's an accomplishment. The inspiration I've seen with the staff as far as department heads getting out of the way and letting them innovate and come to better ideas of how to move forward and how to be conservative, and as far as their budgets, figuring out solutions, working within those budgets, that takes a special skill set. So I hope you all recognize that you have a person over there that's met a lot of these high bars that you're trying to set, and that you recognize that the city has moved into a better direction. And his goal, from what I can see, is to serve you and to serve the city in the utmost best way he can. And part of that is because of his management style of letting these folks take the lead and lead themselves to make them better leaders. So I would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak on this behalf. And I appreciate your leadership. And I do notice today that you are leading outstandingly. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Good afternoon. Jim Creddy, 2177 Cedar Springs Way. I was just thinking how I would do this to start from scratch. my former career, I'm retired, was electrical engineering, and I was a department manager, and oftentimes the HR would hand us a system that we use for criteria. But if I had to start from scratch, I don't know where I would start. But I was looking up some things, and I'm sure you all are familiar with the Florida City and County Management Association, FCCMA, at their website. They seem to have a very nice layout of what they use to score city managers. And it seems like it incorporates a lot of what you all folks were talking about. It's like a level higher than the attorney was talking about, where he's talking about specific goals. But they use 10 what they call performance dimensions. You know, the first one is professional and skill experience, and the council folks would rate 1 to 5. And there's 10 of them. That was the first one, and the last one is individual characteristics. I don't want to go over each one of these, but if that's something you'd look at their website, it's the. In my former career, I would always try to say, I don't want to start inventing the wheel. There's a wheel out there somewhere. Where is it? Well, it seems like this particular organization would pretty much have the answer, right? You know, the FCCMA folks. So just something to think about. That's probably where I would start. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Anyone else? Seeing no one else, oh, yes.
Online?
Anybody online?
Nobody online, okay. Nobody online. So, seeing no one else, I'll bring it back, council, and, I guess, we given you some kind of direction. I like the last suggestion too, like I say, I do know, to be honest with you, I was shocked to find out so many cities didn't, have, anything set up as far as evaluating the city managers and everything. Of course, as Mr. Van Wagner said as well, I know he's true about that, the fact that he'd be evaluated every day, every week. I know I don't have no problem if I don't like something, I'll call him about something. You know, like I do that. And of course, I've always been the type of person that I prefer telling somebody about it. As I mentioned before, when I was in the Air Force and they started making us evaluate everybody every 6 months, I was a little upset with it. But I turned and learned to agree with it, because then I can always let a person know, because my system was soon as the person came to work with me, the first thing I did was sit down and talk to them and let them know what my expectation was. I got mad about this every 6 months because I had to write a lot of APRs, okay? Yeah, I had 300-400 people underneath me sometime, and it used to be creating a lot of work, but after a while, I realized that the 6 months, 6-month period, it was a great thing, because even though I gave you that initial perception and everything, at 6 months, I can tell you exactly where you stand, where you stand in meeting those goals, and have time to correct it.
Well, we do a monthly report from like finance, and then
Right.
we have a quarterly presentation,
Right.
and then we have the annual, final. I think that's a really good way. If something's important, you're going to look at it and touch it, and if we're designing this to be the vision of the city, I think that's, it's good that he knows that, I would say maybe even we get a state of the city quarterly. I'm getting a little farther down the road, but I think having a state of the city produced, from the city manager's office quarterly, to say, this is what we're working on, this is where we are, I think that would be a great thing, and then we could review those, annually.
I don't think a state of the city or quarterly is a good idea. That's a lot of work. Annually, it's gonna be enough work, okay? It's not easy.
And we'll get there. We'll
Yeah.
get there.
Right, that's
But-
what
I don't want us to
get.
get,
But the thing is-
I hate for us to get to a point where, right now, we're
Yeah.
talking about the next
Right.
piece, and it clouds even
Right.
getting to that next step.
Well,
I think we've got a good framework to start.
all right.
And then we can really have those conversations about, based off all of that, what would we like to see as those goals or aspirations? And that is probably a conversation when we're sitting up there, because it's action oriented in terms of taking a vote on something that we can do. But I think we're in a good spot.
So I have a visual for my notes, in case this shows up to everybody. What I'd like to draw, what I'm seeing is, so we would have the charter criteria, expectations or standards, max 5, that we would each write down. Aspirations, max 3. These are my proposals of the numbers. And then any proposed other criteria. So we got the charter, but then communication, I didn't hear in the charter of how we communicate, and I heard, you know, someone else say what he keeps it, I put avoid drama or a bad brand was how I heard it. So maybe we want to say, maybe there's other criteria, but these are the charter criteria, and then maybe we want to submit for each other's consideration additional criteria with the standards and the aspirations connected to it. We compile those. And I'll say, maybe I could have heard it wrong, but I would not, at the next phase of us reviewing, I would not necessarily want to have yet, what are the standards of meeting expectations or exceeding expectations? I think once we get to the point, I would submit that then when we have our kind of 3 for each category is where we would say, okay, this is what meeting expectations would be. Otherwise, it's a lot of extra work for no real reason. Does that sound like, is that what I've drawn? I'm gonna give this to Dan, if that's.
Yeah, I really don't care if it's 2, 5, 4, I'm less focused on a number
Okay.
and more focused on a concept at this point, and so I'm totally okay. I think our city attorney and deputy city manager, whomever is involved with them in kind of creating a shell, it has the consensus of where things stand, and I trust them to do that.
So no max, keep it open.
Well, I mean, I guess if they say based off of what they come forward with that 4 is 5, 3 is the magic number, I'm willing to trust that and get it started that way for that to get us to the next step, rather than get bogged down in a deciding what a number has to be right now to even get there.
I need to clarify. I'm talking about what we give them to compile.
Right.
Because if we each gave them 5 different ones, there's 25, right? But maybe we say at this point we want to be broad. I'm just thinking.
Well,
about
that
it.
was one of the other problems we had. We had everybody coming all together. We had this such a long list.
Right.
That's why I said we kind of somewhat take ourselves out of it and leave it to 2 or 3 people to do this and come up with more general and more detailed points and everything, and bring it back to us and everything. And then we, as Mr. Ward said, then we can go through and say, yeah, 1, 2, this mean this, and then he compile them and come back and we end up with a
Kind of like
final
we give
version.
you the block of
Yeah,
marble and then
right.
you chisel it into
Right,
David.
right, see, so I like that. And I think with Mr. Wah, Nadine, with HR, and Mr. Mathis talked about chipping in and everything, because he understands some of the real responsibilities of the city manager as well, and Nadine, to make sure we keep ourselves legal and everything. I think they may be able to come up with a good list for us to choose from. I mean, if I don't have no problem saying, hey, go to Mr. Ward and tell him some of what your expectation, but I just don't want to see us come up with this one item where we got 900
Right.
areas
I'm
underneath
with-
it.
I'm
Don't
with
worry,
you.
don't worry about that. That's
See-
not gonna-
See, that's one of the things that was happening with us before, because each one of us was coming up and we were doing that, and we could never really narrow things down.
Right.
Okay, we were having trouble, and then the other big issue was, were we gonna do it in public, which we can come back to that later, and I think he gave a good suggestion on how we can do our private evaluation, maybe, and then it can be presented to the public.
I think this is the best conversation that a council in Clermont of recent times has had about this. Because I remember when Councilmember Myers brought this up, and I was a citizen at the time, and we talked a lot about it, because I shared about some of the
Yeah.
experiences we did, and we're like, oh, gosh, we had such a luxury to be able to do it a little bit differently
Yeah.
in a different state with different rules, and how frustrating that could be to go about that. And I think it just went, and then it ended. It just died there. And for us to even be at this point, I think that let's see what we get back. And if we have to mold a little bit more and chisel a little bit more, we will. But we are, I think, on a path to actually have a really intentional and thoughtful process that we can utilize and we can build upon for the future. And I'm really excited about that.
And Ms. Bain, you're right, she brought it up and she got on board, but see, what you didn't know, because you wasn't here, is we had went through that exercise a couple of times with previous council before she joined. And then when she brought it up, we end up going right back down the same road because we were all trying to do it ourselves, and that's why my thought process, hey, let's take ourselves out of it somewhat and give it to somebody else to come up with some criteria for us, so we don't end up going down the same road and have this come up again. But if that's good, well, it's 4:20. If it's all right, Mr. Watt, I know I didn't prepare you for this, and Mr. Van Wagner, I know we had a meeting and we talked about some things earlier this morning. If everybody don't have time, have a few minutes, they're having a problem with a case here in Clermont. I'm talking about the Sunset Lane.
Okay.
Okay, and I would like, if you don't mind, going ahead and explain to the council what's going on there, and what one of our suggestion is about, using state law instead of our nuisance law, and if we can apply that.
Yeah.
So,
Is this a shade unit?
No, it's not a shade meeting, it's a code enforcement issue.
Okay.
So if you all do have time and are inclined to listen, I guess basically what's happened is we do have a property that has come in and out of compliance several times in the past 4 years. Now, I will also say this isn't the only property we have that kind of a problem with. It's fairly common that, you know, a violation will be identified, it'll be corrected within the time allowed, and maybe it won't even be brought to the board. But the problem is when you have these repeat violations, whether it's 1919 Sunset Lane or not, we need remedies, and I think as a policy matter, you as the council need to know that you have remedies, you know, that don't necessarily involve just constantly banging our head against the wall, going back to the board, if you will. The board is actually fairly limited in the remedies that it can do. It can levy fines, and in Clermont, much to my surprise, really, it's only up to 250. You know, I serve as a special magistrate in Citrus County. A day, it's not small, I mean, it's not chump change, but it's small compared to most local governments, where I have the authority to go up to $1,000 a day in Citrus County. Now, I've never done that, but I've gone to 800 based on the health, safety, sanitary issues. Okay, so back to the issue at hand. This property in particular came up at the hearing last night, and a violation.
It was the one that came up here too, right? Not, what, 3 months ago?
Yes, it was.
well, the resident came up and brought
Citizen
it.
came up,
Yeah.
a neighbor.
Yeah, the neighbor.
A neighbor
It's a
came.
problem, and there's additional things going on with the property. The long and short of it is that we as the city need to start thinking about when and how we address the solution permanently. The board cannot do that. The board can assess fines, can put liens on the property to the extent that a fine isn't paid, but there are other remedies. So for example, Florida stat.
Have the liens been paid?
Well, it really hasn't come to the board for a lien
They
yet.
just placed it, not a lien, but they just placed the fines last time.
Yeah, so, well, they have a time to comply, so they have 10 days to comply with the, to fix the violation. If it's not brought into compliance in 10 days, $250 a day.
But what is the violation?
So,
Well, let her finish his thought.
So I
Can he
understand,
finish his thought?
have they been, has the board failed to fine in the past, or they have?
No, it just
continued
hasn't
to
even been brought, they'll
No.
bring it into compliance and then
Yeah.
it won't be presented. But that's,
Finish
so
his
here's
thought.
the issue. The issue is this. There are properties where this is an issue where the remedy in order to fix it permanently exceeds what the board can do. And there is a state statute that allows us to address nuisances. Florida statute section 60.05. It's etched in my head even though not prepared. And what it does is it gives the city attorney authority to bring nuisance actions. These are old common law actions that used to exist because, you know, what would happen in the old days if a mill got out of hand and was polluting the water downstream? You had to be able to sue them. Anyway, so that's in our statutes, and you could authorize, I'm not proposing this, by the way, I'm just saying you have this option, but the city attorney can actually sue to enjoin the nuisance. I can go down to the Lake County Court and get an injunction against, maybe dogs are running loose and biting folks, maybe it's any kind of nuisance you can think of, and if they're enjoined and don't comply, then sanctions start coming from the judge. Then liens can start running and we can also foreclose. It's something that I think we're going to have a more comprehensive discussion about in the future, but I think it is good that you know we're trying to assess permanent or maybe just more leverage. I don't think, and I would never advocate to the city that its policy goal should be to punish or to take property. Like, that's a serious, serious thing. But the city does need to have the appropriate leverage to make sure that we don't keep coming back at the same property.
The government's role is to preserve life, liberty, and to create an environment where the people can pursue their own happiness. And these folks' liberty ends where their neighbors begins, and that's our job to enforce that.
That's the
So-
purpose of our code
So
enforcement.
that's what a nuisance is.
Yes.
It's where your liberty infringes on my liberty. And when you have anybody who is repeatedly violating a rule like that, you're gonna have my support. I can't imagine an exception, but you would have my support moving forward with a lawsuit
Well,
to enforce it.
well, here's one of the problems we're facing, is the fact that we have a few of these places out there, and that's one of the reasons we went back and we fought hard and put our own little nuisance law in place. But our nuisance law, ordinance isn't very strong, it's kind of weak, okay? For example, it says in there, if I, basically, I live in this address, if I have, an arrest this month, okay, no problem, even though I got ongoing problem. But you have to have 2 arrests at this address, within a 6 months period, for us to be able to take nuisance
That's
action.
the only standard for nuisance?
No, that's,
Well,
so.
there's a lot of other standards
Yeah.
there, but, you know, if they don't occur within a 6 months period, there's nothing we can do. Every 6 months, the clock starts over, okay, and everything. So it's really, and we put this in place, and I'll be honest with you, I think you was on the council when we put all this in place, and it's one of the things I fought for, because we have some problem houses. As I said the other night, one of the reasons I got involved with the police department, because it's a nuisance house in my own neighborhood, I live right across the street from it, and it's still a nuisance. But, and I've been dealing with it for 15 years or more, since I started here, since 07, I think it is, and it's still a problem. Matter of fact, I just had a big fight there last night, while I was out, and everything, was a big fight there, and it's constant things going on, and the one house I was actually, we were looking at, between the other administration and I, and a lawyer before, one home that we were really, targeting with the nuisance, when we were coming up with this nuisance thing, is, as soon as we put it in place, guess what? The person moved out, made the neighborhood so much better, okay? But we still have this area over here that's still being dealt with, you know, and I would like to give the neighbors some relief. They've been dealing with this for a few years now. And I know how I feel to have to sit there and deal with that, because like I say, I'm still dealing with it and with one right across from me. Okay?
So Christian, in your opinion and experience, based on the other nuisance statute ordinances that you've seen, what elements are missing from our nuisance ordinance, generally speaking, or specifically related to Clermont, that you think should be in our nuisance ordinance?
Well, I don't know that anything is missing per se. What I want to tell you is your nuisance abatement statute is based on the Florida statute that enables, and it lists a bunch of criteria. I'm just saying it is so narrow, and the state statute has some of that too. The state statute, though, does have greater remedies for how you resolve it than what our city ordinance does. So I think the remedies that are available, you know, when I was an assistant city attorney for Ocala, we had an incident where there was a gas station that kept being used as people kept getting arrested there for felony drug transactions, basically. And the city council finally told the city attorney, go take the property, basically. And I felt it was unconstitutional at the time. And that's why the Florida legislature passed that abatement statute, because now it's enabled the city to, when that kind of a transaction happens, it's no longer an argument about whether it's unconstitutional. If they satisfy, and there's a felony drug transaction, that's the one exception to the 2 and 6 months thing, it's once. But it's a big power. I mean, that's my, I just,
Well, it's an issue of liberty. So if our ordinance isn't strong enough to preserve liberty in our borders, then it needs to be stronger. And if it is strong enough and we're not enforcing it, then we need to exercise justice.
we're walking through and having that discussion today, actually, and I think we'll be presenting some ideas to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's ongoing with that. And the reason I asked him to go ahead and get in this, because if I'm not mistaken, if we want to do anything, for abatement and everything, I think that's have to be a decision of the council, and everything. I know the code enforcement board has the authority over the nuisance law and determine, but they actually found a decision whether we're gonna do anything. If I'm not mistaken,
If
has
you
to
wanted
come
to
back
unleash
council.
me directly,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, it has to come back to council, and I wanted to make sure you all somewhat up to date on some things that we gonna have to try to do, and I think they've been taking every step, even the neighbors and everything, you know, they commenting to the city about how great work they've been doing everything they legally, can. So what else, what other action can we get? And I know like we met last night, we talked about $250, I think we was going in with 150 before the case last night, but we through conversation, we decided to shoot it to the max, see? So, you know, so we taking all the actions we somewhat can, but is it giving the neighbors any relief? See?
Yeah, and that's what I say, maybe the law isn't strong enough. I wouldn't want all the abatement actions to come to council. Do you just mean when we hire a lawyer to sue, or do you mean all the abatements?
Well, we don't do very many abatements, see? And I
But we're
think
beginning to change that.
we're starting to try to change all that,
Yeah.
that's what I mean, you know? Because right now, the way things are, and like I say, this case been going on for years as well, because we kind of limited to what we can do, okay? You know, and when the abatement do come to, if they do decide to go to abatement, yeah, I think council has to give the final word on it, if I'm not mistaken, okay?
Is that a legal issue? Why would we have to enforce the law?
It depends on what you want the remedy. As long as you're deferring to code enforcement to handle this, either through notices of code violations or notices to abate, you don't need to be involved. If that's not getting the job done, and you need me to go to a judge to go get an injunction, and the real hammer, if you will, it's not something you do on every case. I mean, I've done it for other cities, but only when it was like an emergency, for example. I had to do it in an emergent because there was a property where dogs were running loose, and people were getting bit, and we didn't have time to wait for the code board. So I went, got the injunction, cleaned it up, and it was over.
So is staff seeking direction on how many times code enforcement needs to hear a case, or how many times police need to go to a house before it becomes an abatement issue? Is that what?
I'd like to ask for a little time to work with your staff on finalizing the improvements we're going to make, because we're having in-depth discussions on this across departments about how we're going to handle it. And they've been in earnest today and yesterday. Yeah.
Well, you know, like I say, this is more like, information more or less, not looking for action, but just to inform y'all what's going on, because I don't know where we're leading. I think in the last few days, we've had a lot of somewhat improvement from the discussion I got this morning, with Mr. Van Wagner and everybody. It seemed like, things may be happening as good, but, at the same time, while I'm here and you mentioned dogs, Mr. Van Wagner, I think I would like for you to get with the Lake County Animal Protection to understand, and really get me an understanding of how they can say a dog can run around loose in the neighborhood until they bite somebody, they're not gonna do anything, okay? Seriously bite someone. I think that, I mean, that's the most asinine thing I ever heard of. And you got dogs running around and people tell them they call animal control, saying they're not gonna do anything unless the animal seriously bites someone.
Yep, they say that.
Huh?
Situation. We both know how to handle that situation.
See,
Whoa.
yeah, but then I may be in jail, okay?
I'm a little worried.
See,
I don't think we're on the
but-
same page.
No, I'm not looking to do all that, but, you know, and that's one of the questions came up, well, what happened, nothing, but anyway, Mr. Van Wagner, while he thinking about it, I meant to ask you to do that today, when we was talking earlier and everything, but, cause I really need to figure out how our animal control can tell this to our residents and everything. And they consider, all these dogs run around in the neighborhood free, they refuse to come out.
Well, I would suggest to both our attorney and our city manager, if we're finding that there are issues that can't be enforced by the police or by code enforcement, we just need a revised ordinance. I mean, when the American flag issue came up, we revised our ordinance. When we see things that aren't strong enough, or need to be stronger, or need to go away, then we revise the ordinance so that staff can do their jobs.
I understand. I mean, I think that there are some things that we can do that we haven't necessarily been doing just because there's a way things have happened for so long. So for example, sometimes even when a case abates, in other words, they fix the violation before the hearing, sometimes it's a good idea to still bring the case to the board so that they can make a finding that it happened, so that the next time it's a repeat violation and the fine starts from that. But that's not really been our practice. But we've talked about that. We're going to start implementing that on these kinds of cases. So
Yes, and I think if we're gonna have the conversation, we have to include in this conversation, and it is a change, and it is something that will probably create some community conversation about whether or not we want to empower our code enforcement staff to initiate cases rather than require a citizen to put their name,
Oh.
address on the form, because that's now what state
It's public,
requires.
Yeah, public.
For fear of blowback,
Yeah.
they don't, and our staff's hand gets tied
Yeah.
until someone does and is willing, like the individuals who came and have sent us several emails and are, have spoken at city council about this particular address. They're willing to put their name out there and file a case. There are neighborhoods that I'm sure several of us have talked to neighbors where they're like, I'm not willing to put my name on that complaint.
Yeah,
But right now, we don't allow our code enforcement to take that initiative without that complaint.
I've had discussions with code about this.
And I think we need to,
Is that just residential?
I don't know that it's just
No.
residential. I think it's
It
either,
doesn't matter.
we don't have either the practice or the ordinance that allows it to happen. And I do think it requires some community conversation about it on both sides, and I think we need to be judicious about it, because I certainly understand concerns, but at the same time, if we're going to take code enforcement serious, I think we need to look at kind of all the things on the table and look at how might we create a system moving forward that would allow our community to address these things in a way that, that empowers staff, but also doesn't potentially put our residents in a compromising situation.
Well, if Mr. Wilder, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we used to have that ability to report anonymously, okay, but then
But
the
yeah,
state.
That's right.
State
State
law,
changed
yeah,
the
state
law.
law changes.
So that created that problem there for us. The state created another problem for us, so we can't do anonymous.
Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, we can still act as the complainant.
Yes.
Staff can't. So we just need
Yes,
direction from
we
council.
can.
But that is
to
council
be
direction.
Proactive,
We can, but wait, and we have,
right.
okay.
while I've been the city attorney.
Right.
So I'm not sure where the disconnect is, but I know we have served as the complainant on some code violations.
Right, and I think what we just need is council directive to be proactive.
I see.
We don't need to change any ordinance, we just need council to tell us.
Yeah, nothing is
Proactive.
required, code is not required to stick their head in the sand when they drive around town.
Right, and I'm sorry, and that's where I said, I don't know if it's actually code or if it's just more of a direction of what council's will is for direction for the city manager and the staff, to be able to say, we want you to be proactive in this enforcement.
Then,
And if that means we have to kind of create a criteria level for that, then yeah, we do. But I think right now, it's been, the standard operating procedure has been that it's a little bit more on the reactive side, and there have been the exceptions where the staff has initiated, but it defers to be more reactive.
And we can definitely go proactive with your direction, and we can set levels, because there may be a staffing implication that we may need more staff if we go a lot more proactive.
But that's at the direction of the council.
Correct.
And I guess one of the reasons, I didn't think we were gonna get in that big long discussion about it, but one of the reasons I wanted to make you all aware of some of the things going on, because basically it's gonna probably take, our direction eventually in case it does, you're aware of what's going on, okay? And I'm sorry for, if I know you weren't prepared.
I love it.
but-
I got to hear my voice. Appreciate it, man.
and everything, last thing I want to say, and not to really get in another long discussion, but keep in consideration, I know Ms. Myers served on the Code Enforcement Board, I served on the Code Enforcement Board, but we got some members on the Code Enforcement Board because the nuisance law, they're the ones supposed to deal with that too. But some of them, our board members don't want to have to do that. When it comes, they don't feel like they should do that, so, we may need to consider going back to a magistrate. I know you don't like it, I don't like magistrate, but for the Code Enforcement Board, because I'm hearing we got members that's requesting to come off now, okay?
Can we do magistrate for just
Just for that,
abatement
yeah. Can we do
versus
that?
code enforcement?
We could.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not do that instead of
Yeah.
the whole board?
Because I can tell you, yeah, we serve together.
Yes, yes, yes.
And it truly is, honestly, a valuable experience to understand the complexities of these types of things, because what, someone who lives next to it may feel is, look, I'm having to live next to us, but there has to be some sort of criteria that a city has to meet in order to take some sort of action, because we are talking about property and liberties and so forth. And I would like to see us keep our code enforcement board. I also fully get where the difference between code enforcement and nuisance abatement. And I would support us exploring a magistrate for nuisance abatement purposes only, and keeping code enforcement board.
I
for
agree
code.
with that. I think the citizens.
All right, just, like I said, I didn't want to get in another long discussion, just want to throw some things out there that we probably have to take a look at sooner or later and everything, because there are issues that's out there and everything, and I know you all probably not aware of, but, but I'm getting calls about this kind of stuff on a regular basis.
We should enforce our laws.
Well, it's hard to enforce it when some things, like I say, I'm coming home last night from a place, and I get all my neighbors calling me last night, what's going on, what's going on? I don't know, I'm not home, Once I called my chief, and he tell me it's a big, when the call came in, a big fight, and of course, I get home, it's gone. I get on my cameras, and yeah, I can see the big fight, it was pretty, maybe seven, at least 6, 8 people that was involved, right down the corner, So, of course, every time these kind of things go on, who the first person they call? Me. See, in the neighbor, when they see the police lights and everything, what was it, last week it was the armed robbery that came through the neighborhood, right there in the back of the neighborhood, Thing, Winn-Dixie, and I'm coming home and turn the corner, I see all these lights flashing, oh man, what's going on? Of course, my phone started ringing, okay. I don't know, let me call and find out, and of course, thank God, Chief had already texted me, I didn't realize it, because I hadn't been on my phone, I didn't realize it, I just picked up the phone and called him, and of course, after I talked with him, I realized he did text me and everything, and found out what's going on, but, so these things out here, and of course, it's happening, and I deal with them, I remember not long ago, councilman, we had a shooting in the neighborhood, and I'm sitting up here on the dais, and I'm getting texts on the dais. They done sent me texts on the dais, oh, all this activity going on, I don't know, I'm in the council meeting, okay? So it's things going on out there. And not all of it is, I think it's places like 1919 and bless, and like the one in front of me, the house in front of me, because they all congregate and they all out of the community, all know one another. See, so how can we make our laws and ordinance a little bit stronger, that we can take a little bit more stronger action, okay?
No, I support.
So thank you. Anybody else have anything for the good of the?
Just had one real quick question,
Yes.
Mayor. The criteria that you want Christian and Nadine and I to work on, do you have a time frame for us to bring it back to you?
I think next month's pretty busy.
Meg?
Yeah, before budget, I think when we do our budget, that would be a good time, because this is kind of visioning oriented as well.
I think I heard Mr. Bain talk about trying to get everything in place by at the end of the year, right? Is that what I heard?
Well, I think moving forward, it might make sense if we were gonna do annually to kind of have after a new council, you do it, you kind of review the previous goals and set the new ones with that new council. That makes sense, but again, it can be whatever we want to try to create. I think the first time around, depending upon when we do it, may not match and align with what all the future processes might look like. And so if this one doesn't work with what we envision moving long-term, that's okay. But I do think earlier the better, so that we can start the process and get some expectations on the table and review, and also start talking about goals and aspirations, and strategic vision, as it ties into the budget.
I work at the council's pleasure.
I mean, it's a list of like.
We have a
things.
May workshop. Is the May workshop
wishes,
pre-budget?
whatever.
Is that what we established
Yeah,
on
that
the,
one's free, but-
on the agenda, that sheet that we approved? I think, wasn't it May was, budget?
Yeah, it was.
I mean, I think we could easily hit that. I don't have any
If-
trouble.
Yeah.
Can you get us the list by next week?
The
And
May
then
workship
We
is
can spend a
budget.
week and then we get it to the staff, they give them 2 weeks.
I don't
and-
wanna overload it,
That's
I
kinda-
mean, I'm give them a time to work,
Yeah,
I
maybe
say if
it's
you can get us, as she's saying, the list in a month, within a month or week, right on it. Because I can say, I think I heard Mr. Bain say we wanna try to have, if we can get everything in place by the end of the year. Think, give them time to put the list together, we come back and we can narrow it down and work on it and try to get every, thing in place by the end of the year, so.
No problem.
That's not putting, if
No,
30 days for the list, that's not
That's
too
fine.
much.
It's totally
Okay.
fine.
What did we decide? I'm sorry. We were talking about the workshop, and then there was the other piece.
Number 30.
30 days to
30
get
days
you
with
the
the
list,
list,
yeah.
the first list and
Right,
everything we
right.
go through, okay. All right,
Thank you, sir.
thank you, and nothing else? Nope. Meeting adjourned.